I think your comments bore that out. Dr. Gorka, we'll move on to your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Cleveland, General Linda, Chancellor Bell, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm going to stay in the arena of irregular warfare, and I have no problem with fog and friction, but I hate grayness. So I will not be discussing grayness today, despite the topic of our conference. What I'll do instead is based upon why I think I'm here. When Major Engelmeyer invited me, I think it was because of the program that my company ran for 2 years for the former CG in support of his RSOF 2020 initiative. And that was a program that analyzed the evolution of irregular warfare, right from the Barbary pirates up to OEF, OIF, and our current missions against ISIS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize the findings of that 2-year project and specifically how they apply to ISIS. The first remark is a strategic one to do with the battle landscape, and it's to do with the concept of what future war will look like. For a lot of people, these are the kinds of images that come to mind when we say future conflict or future war. Tech heavy. It is stealth, it is armed UAVs, and of course, if you are big green, how are you going to get onto the battlefield to vanquish America's foes? You're going to do it like Tony Stark. Yes, you're going to put on your Talos Iron Man suit, and you're going to vanquish our enemies. The trouble with this is appealing to our strategic culture and our proclivity for technological solutions to everything. There's a problem with this expectation. It is totally Bravo Sierra. Okay, somebody did have some caffeine, the rest of you didn't, clearly. Okay, why? Because the future threat environment will look like today's threat environment. And today's threat environment isn't about technology. It's not clean, it's not neat. Whether you're one of the girls from Chibok taken hostage by Boko Haram a year and a half ago simply because you're a Christian, whether you're one of the Yazidis chased up a mountainside by ISIS because you are a pagan, whether you're a man, probably a Sunni, who got on the wrong side of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and therefore had to be crucified somewhere in ISIS territory, or whether you're one of those tourists or Parisians having your dinner in a cafe in a restaurant in downtown Paris recently, or a hostage taken by ISIS, who can't be bothered to cut your head off anymore with a fixed blade knife, so instead what are they going to use? Detonating cord. They're going to sever your head from your shoulders at 3,000 feet per second. And lastly, of course, whether you are Lieutenant Qasas Bey of the Hashemite Royal Air Force, captured by ISIS and burnt alive. This is the reality of the current battlefield. It is messy. It is not the kind of wars we like to fight. However, it is the wars we will fight in the future. Why? Is that just Dr. Gorka's opinion? No, we base it on empirical data. 4 years ago, David Kilcullen and I wrote an article for JFQ. You can download the whole article. It's called An Actor-Centric Theory of War. It's a critique of FM 324. But the purpose of this slide is just to look at the threat environment. There is at the University of Pennsylvania a very useful open source database I commend to everybody who works in national security. It's called the Correlates of War Project. The Correlates of War Project. And it has crunched all the key data from every conflict since Napoleon, from 1815 to 2015. And if you do a taxonomy of those wars, you find something quite striking. According to this database's definition of war, there have been 460 conflicts since Napoleon in the world. 460. Of those, less than 20% were conventional. That little red box. Less than 20% of all war was tanks fighting tanks, fighter pilots dogfighting it out in the air. 80% of war, the blue and yellow areas, are what we call IW or UW, irregular warfare or unconventional warfare. 380 conflicts out of 460 fall into the domain of USASOC. As a result, our joint pubs are completely mislabeling the reality. What we call IW should be called CW. The Pentagon should call conventional warfare the anomalous war. but don't tell the Navy and don't tell the Air Force. Okay? So that's just the empirical facts. Messy wars against non-state actors or state actors using unconventional means is war. And unfortunately, our policymakers and our joint pub writers really understand that. So, what I'm going to talk to you for the rest of the presentation is the last report we did for the CG on the Islamic State, on ISIS. We're very proud of this report. The CG said it is releasable to anybody who's interested. I've asked in the back if the mic runners, they have sign-up sheets. They can be handed out to the auditorium. If you wish to get a copy of this unclassed report, put your name on our sign-up sheet and we will send you a PDF of the report. But what are our summary findings? Very briefly, 4 reasons why ISIS is special. Number 1, ISIS is much more powerful than Al-Qaeda because it is a fully fledged transnational insurgency. Al-Qaeda was never an insurgency, not in the sense of mobilizing its own base. It exploited pre-existing insurgencies such as Al-Shabaab in Somalia or the Taliban in Afghanistan. ISIS is different. ISIS has generated its own fighting base, counting more than 65,000 fighters. Second, it's transnational. We have never seen this before. We have never seen an insurgent group hold territory in multiple countries, and as of 6 months ago, multiple continents. When Boko Haram changed its name to the Islamic State province of West Africa, that meant that Boko Haram territory now falls under the caliphate of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. That is an African jihadi group, which is now uniting with the Middle Eastern caliphate in Syria and Iraq. That is a stunning metric by itself. Second, richest threat group of its kind in human history. Just a fact. A month ago, the FT on its front page had an analysis of the spreadsheets, if you will, of ISIS. In the last 12 months, the Financial Times has estimated ISIS made $500 million. $500 million. The 9/11 Commission reports estimated that 9/11 cost Al-Qaeda $500,000. That's scales of magnitude larger. Third, most obviously, and the CG actually called this staggering, he used that adjective at a recent event here in DC, is their mobilizational capacity. Al-Qaeda never came close to this. ISIS recruited 19,000 foreign fighters in the first 9 months of its renewed operations in Iraq, and according to the UN, which is a lowball estimate, in the first 12 months of its renewed activities in Syria and Iraq, recruited 22,000 foreign fighters, 4,000 of whom are Westerners. And that's on top of the Iraqis and Syrians that they have recruited. That is really very impressive. And lastly, most important of all, the thing that we rarely discuss adequately, especially in the intelligence community, is what happened last summer in Mosul. When Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi climbs up to the podium of the Grand Mosque at Mosul and declares the reestablishment of the caliphate with himself as the caliph, this is a moment in history. Why? Because for 90 years, the jihadists, the Salafists, the Takfiris have failed to reestablish the caliphate after Ataturk dissolved it in 1924. Not the Brotherhood, not the Ikhwan, not Al-Qaeda, none of these groups were successful in reestablishing the caliphate along their own lines. ISIS didn't talk about it, ISIS did it. And that is a key to their success and their capacity to recruit people here and in the Middle East. So, to conclude, I'm just going to throw the data up there, read the report at your leisure. Here are our main conclusions. ISIS is much more successful than Al-Qaeda. Why? For some very simple, identifiable reasons. It's not magic and it's not luck. Number one, they have a correct understanding of irregular warfare. I don't have time to go into this. We can talk about this in the Q&A. Al-Qaeda was based upon Guevarist IW. It was based upon Che Guevara's theory of FOCOism, where the threat group commander is the key mobilizer. Everybody knows that Che Guevara was an idiot. Yes? He may be on the T-shirts, but he's dead and he's a failure. ISIS didn't read Che, they read Mao. And Mao was absolutely on the money when he said it's not just about violence, it's about providing governance, providing services. And ISIS is now recruiting for engineers and health workers. That should tell you something. Second, we just have to be blunt about the reality on the ground. If you look at the enemy threat doctrine of ISIS, it is religiously informed. whether you like it or not. Whether you're an atheist, whether you are postmodern, whether you are secular, the enemy is using a religious narrative, and you just have to incorporate that into your intelligence preparation of the battlefield. Self-censoring these truths, especially about the enemy threat doctrine, will endanger our warfighters and will prolong the war. If we persist at the policymaker level to say the threat to America is about jobs for jihadis, yeah, economics, lack of education, then USASOC, JSOC, Virginia Beach will be fighting these guys 100 years from now. And it will simply be whack-a-mole. We have to undermine their legitimacy ideologically with our Muslim allies in the region. And then lastly, I think this was the biggest take-home for us working for the CG. Babylon doesn't get it. Inside the Beltway, the people that make the decisions at the highest level, simply after 14 years, do not understand irregular warfare. You go into a White House meeting and you throw the word FID versus IW or UW, and they think you're talking Swahili, okay? This is a problem. The reality that we have strategic decisions being made with an utter absence of the strategic understanding of what SF and SOF are for and how IW functions is part of the reason we are where we are today. I don't know if the sign-up sheets can be handed out. Paul in the back, if they're going around. If you want a précis, a very quick précis, I wrote a piece for the USASOC magazine Special Warfare last year. The whole magazine article is on that Scribd link. It's about the center of gravity of the global jihadist movement. If you want a grad school take, if you want a game plan at the strategic level, an organization my wife was affiliated with published a book called Fighting the Ideological War. We took the very best national security practitioners from the Cold War, locked them in a room with the very best experts on jihad today, and we said, give us a game plan for taking down this totalitarian ideology, and that's the publication that came out of it. And then lastly, if you want access to all our public documents, or if you have a question that is beyond the Q&A, best way to reach me is my Gmail. Everything that I do for public consumption is at my personal site, thegorkabriefing.com. Everything we do for USASOC, for the FBI, for the IC is at threatknowledge.org. That's our commercial site. If you work CONUS issues, we just published 5 days ago a report that's getting a lot of airtime on the domestic ISIS threat. Just pure metrics on ISIS arrests in America. That's available at threatknowledge.org. And then lastly, especially to our CTF and HDF colleagues, my wife has a foundation that monitors the growth of jihadi ideology in all theaters, not just the Middle East, but Africa and elsewhere as well, and that's the Council on Global Security. So there's my site, our site that supports USG, and then our jihadi ideology monitoring site. You might want to check those out and be on those distros. Thank you very much. Steve, back to you.
Thanks a lot. Dr. Hoffman, as soon as we get your slides up.
Well, quite honored to be here today.